Asians, and I don't even remember the people.
Okay, well, see, so I have a friend in Australia,
Uh-huh.
and we were watching UFC together.
Okay.
And there's a MMA fighter who's really popular. His name's Conor McGregor.
Right. I know who Conor McGregor is.
And he was fighting Khabib Nurmagomedov. And they had gotten into an altercation during the press conference. And Khabib started what? So I'm completely ignorant about everything. I'm listening to this altercation. And to me, it appeared that Khabib was making fun of his countrymen, basically calling them cowards. And he says, why don't you speak your own language? Oh, the English changed your language. So I was talking to my friend in Australia. I was like, so what I got from that, and I actually told her about you. I'm like, I got a friend named Dave who's coming over tomorrow. He's like the beard of knowledge. And I'm going to get to talk to him. So maybe he'll be able to tell me exactly what's doing here.
Okay, so I can get into a little bit of history here. So the Irish people were originally descended from a tribe known as the Celts. Okay, now the Celts spread from East Europe all across Europe onto the British Isles.
Where did they start from?
They don't really know where they started from. They think they started in the German area, and they just sort of spread out. And they started as a bunch of hunter-gatherers, and then they had a loose-knit community. This is at the same time of the Roman Empire, and even before Rome was an empire, you had just this band of people known as Celts. You'll hear about them. There's the Goths, and then the Gauls. And they were, in fact, in France and Spain, they were referred to as Gauls by the Romans. And they came down and screwed around with the Romans before the Romans were even an empire. Now, the Celtish people, the only thing that really held them together was their religion. And their religious leaders were known as Druids. Now, you may have heard of Druids. Anyways, in this religion...
So the Druids are from an actual religion? It's not like the Undertaker made up WWF thing?
No. The Druids were holy men of this religion known as paganism.
Oh,
today. Wow. They believed in natural spirits. They believed in a god and a goddess and all of that. And then there were other lesser gods or deities, natural spirits, like tree gods, river gods, so on and so forth. And, there were evil spirits, and, Halloween comes from an old pagan religion, or old pagan rite called All Hallows Eve, where you would put out totems to scare the evil spirits away from your house. You would also...
Like actual totem poles? Is that where that comes from?
Well, I say totems. We would call them jack-o'-lanterns now.
Oh.
The carved pumpkins. But they would carve fetishes and stuff like that.
So it wasn't just out of pumpkin?
Right. It was out of whatever they could get. Gourds, pumpkins, just whatever they could do. They tried to make it scary to scare the bad spirits away. They would also leave offerings.
Wait, so this idea of like scaring bad spirits, this goes globally then, because I've heard about this from other cultures like Asia and whatnot.
Yep. So
the human mind naturally evolved on its own in remote regions to create scary images to scare spirits, or was it the religion spreading that did this? I'm interested your thoughts on that.
Okay, so what I think this all comes back to, we don't see very good at night at all. Okay, but the main thing that, as a species, that separates us from other species is our ability for pattern recognition. So in the night, when we can't see well and we think we see a face, we get scared. We don't know what it is. That activates our fight or flight instinct, and that was a survival mechanism for us to survive with all the wild animals. Okay? When and I'm talking about more primitive civilizations or what have you, as they were getting in communities and they had these strange, there was a face there. I swear there was a face there. Oh, it must have been an evil spirit because there's nothing there now. There's no footprints, there's no tracks or anything. So that's where I think the whole concept of evil spirits may have originated from. But who knows precisely? We all believe, or a lot of cultures believe, that when we die, that a part of us continues to survive in some form or fashion. Well, there's some not very nice people in this world. What happens to them when they die? Do they linger around as spirits as well? And since they weren't good people, their spirits are obviously bad. So we have to do
so that was to scare them.
To scare the evil spirits. So they would also leave offerings for the good spirits, their friends.
So when
family.
you say evil spirits, because my first reaction is to think of like ghouls from other dimension, but you're talking about people that died and now are back roaming.
Partially. They also believed in, if you got a stomach cramp or stuff like that, you were continually suffering from headaches or stomach aches. They believed those were evil spirits as well. Or caused by evil spirits. But the point is that Halloween evolved from All Hallows Eve, which was part of this pagan religion that was led by the Druids. Now, again, the Druids spread across all of Europe. They didn't get into Greece or Mesopotamia or Italy. They went down there, but they weren't really interested in land. They were just interested in stuff. So they would raid Rome and Greece and all that, take stuff and go away.
So they just wanted your goods, but they'd let you keep the land.
They'd let you keep the land if you survived, of course.
Yeah, the encounter.
Anyway, so the last bastion of Druidism, or this religion, was the United Kingdoms, what we know as Great Britain or the United Kingdoms. And then the very last bastion was on the small island of Ireland. Oh. And the native language, theoretically, of Ireland is called Gaelic.
Right.
Okay? So this is something that people don't understand. In the United Kingdoms, in the United Kingdom Isles, there were so many different languages. You had English, you had Welsh, you had Scottish, you had Gaelic. I think I want to say there were 6 or 7 different spoken languages. You had the Vikings came in and they brought their language, and then the Normans came in over from France and they brought French in, and so in just these 2 tiny islands, there was just a hodgepodge of different languages. But anyways.
So even in Ireland, it wasn't strictly Gaelic.
It was for the longest time until, the English went over, and the Romans never actually made it over to Ireland, so far as I'm aware. But, there was interaction. Anyways, so the pagan religion survived on Ireland until, of course, the Catholic Church came over, and they converted most of Ireland to Catholicism. So the majority of Ireland was Catholic. Then I want to say it was in the 1200s or something. I'll have to double check that. Some English knights went over there and conquered the northern section, the northern territory of Ireland, called Umberland.
Is that still known as Umberland?
The region is unofficially known as Umberland. It's all of Northern Ireland and part of Ireland, the country, as well. So Northern Ireland is, of course, part of the United Kingdoms, or Great Britain.
Wait, so is Northern Ireland a different country than the other part of Ireland?
Yes. The island of Ireland is 2 different countries. The northern part is owned by the United Kingdoms, as part of the United Kingdoms. And then the southern part is Ireland.
Oh, so when Conor McGregor says he's from Ireland, he's really just talking about the southern part of Ireland.
He's talking about the main island, right? The because Northern Ireland is just like the top right-hand corner of the island, and then the rest of it is Ireland.
So is there like feuding between the two halves, or?
Okay, so what happened is the English came in, they took over Umberland, and, of course the Irish weren't too happy that they had England here invading their island, and there was fighting back and forth.
So it was one piece of land. The English come in, they take over, and how does it stop at half?
It didn't even stop at half. It was like a quarter or a third.
Okay.
So that's all it was a quarter or a third of the island. And they weren't able to advance anymore because, Irish. They're Irish. They're crazy.
Fighters.
They're fighters, that's it. And the Irish weren't fighting according to English conventions, okay? England at the time, knights, cavalry.
They were using guerrilla warfare.
Right. The Irish were using guerrilla warfare, and the English just couldn't find them long enough. After the one knight took over Northumberland, and I wish I could remember his name, he built a castle, and he basically became the king of Northumberland, and eventually he pissed off the English monarch and got taken out himself. But what happened is in King Henry VIII. I'm sure you know who King Henry VIII is.
I am.
I'm King Henry VIII. I am. That's right. When
I was in middle school, they showed us songs about him.
Well, the thing about King Henry VIII, after whatever happened to his head or whatnot, he decided that, I'm the king of this country. I should also be the head of the church. Mm-hmm. And part of the reason why is the Pope would not give him a divorce from his wife, because he wanted to marry his mistress.
Oh, that's right. I heard something about that.
So he decided he would found a new religion, and thus the Protestant Church, or the Church of England, was created.
Okay, so I heard the way he got around that was by killing his wives. Can you clear that up?
He did kill some of his wives. He did actually execute some of his wives, yes. Uh-huh. But originally, he decided he would just found his own religion, take over the church in England,
So you're saying he killed his wives extracurricularly? He didn't
some of them, yeah.
But before, he was like, oh no, they died somehow. Oh, what? I guess I'm gonna get a new wife.
Well, right. And see, some of his wives he'd lock up in the Tower of London, and then, he'd get married and, off with her head. I think it was 3 of his wives he killed.
Yeah, 3 of them he killed. There was
just out of the moodiness?
Yes. So something happened to Henry VIII, and they're not sure what, but, when he was younger, he was very fit, he was in shape, he was very physical and manly and into all sorts of martial activities and stuff like that. And then something happened. He got sick, or there was an accident, and his mind went a little crazy.
And so whatever crazy thing he said, they immediately had to do because he's still in power.
He's the king. He's the king, and if you were loyal to Henry, he gave you lots of stuff. Mm-hmm. If you were disloyal to Henry,
he made you the most miserable person in the world.
Exactly. He wouldn't always kill you either. He'd lock you away for years and years. In fact, one of his best friends, he locked away for years because when he created the Church of England, the Protestant religion, his friend was a devout Catholic.
Wait. So this just clicked. The Protestant religion was created by King Henry?
Yes.
No way.
Yeah, he created the Protestant religion. It's known as the Church of England.
So Christianity would have been nothing but Catholicism if it wasn't for the actions of that king.
Well, maybe. I think there were some at that time. I think there were some other factions, some other sects of Christianity. I believe there were some. What do I want to say? Evangelicalists over in Germany and whatnot. Evangelicalists.
But this is still a prominent religion to this day, right?
Yes, Protestant religion is still a very prominent religion, especially here in the U.S. because the original settlers of the United States, a lot of them came from England.
So how do you hypothesize now that we know that this was just a tactic to skirt the law, and this religion is not built on like any type of genuineness? How did this take off, and how is it still a thing today?
You have to understand, this wasn't the law. This was the Catholic Church saying you can't get divorced without my permission. The Pope saying that. And the King of England, Henry VIII, arguably the most powerful monarch in the world at that time, says, you know what? I'm going to do whatever I want. And since I'm the man that writes the laws for my country, you can't stop me.
How do they theorize, though, like to this day, there are people that are still Protestants and they're devout. How do they reconcile the fact that they can now see that this was a creation of just a guy trying to skirt the law or create the law because he could?
Well, you have to remember...
Is it the Holy Spirit is what I want to ask. Do you think that would be how they would theorize this or cover this so that they can remain in God's graces? Or
you have to remember, in the time that we're talking about, the Roman Catholic Church, the Pope said that, these are your rulers. They were chosen by God. They're blessed by God. That's why they're your rulers. And technically, that's why...
so he used a loophole.
Right. Since I was chosen by God to be your ruler, God is leading me this way. You all must follow.
So this was a bureaucratic debate in the sense because the Pope is chosen by God and supposed to be God's main speaker on earth. But according to his message, the ruler is put in the power for a reason. So he used that stipulation and threw that down.
Right. It's called the divine right of kings. And it was actually part of the Catholic religion in those days, the divine right of kings. You're a king. You've been blessed by the divine one. You share in his powers. You have the right to rule because God has granted you
the... That's brilliant.
So, yes, he just used that loophole and said, well, you know what? God chose me to be king. I'm the monarch of the most powerful country in the world, and God says that I need a divorce. You're refusing God's request, so you're wrong. Therefore, I am taking my kingdom away from the Catholic Church.
What do you theorize is his reason for not making a more aggressive power play? By saying, you know what, God told me that I'm the guy now and you've been corrupted by Satan. I need to execute you.
Well, probably the rest of Europe. Just saying, you got France, Spain, Germany.
But he couldn't play that legislative card to them as well?
He couldn't. Okay, if he had tried to take the entirety of the Catholic nation's Protestant, he would not have succeeded. You have to understand, France and England were always at each other's throats. And they were fairly evenly matched. They would go back and forth for centuries.
So France had lands and territories outside of France as well, then, in order to be able to compete with England, because England had stolen land throughout the globe, right?
Well, not at this time.
Okay.
Not at this time. The New World hadn't really been discovered yet.
Okay.
So, But yeah, the New World hadn't really been.
So there was a shift then, obviously, where England was able to kick the crap out of France because they had expanded so much.
No, believe it or not, the last major war between England and France, actually, our country was involved in, happened at the same time as the American Revolutionary War. And the leader of France at that time was a little short guy.
Napoleon.
That's right. He wasn't really all that short. He was 5'6", which for that time was actually...
Do you think that's just cartoonish? Like political cartoons that just took a life of its own where they would paint him as a small person?
Probably. But every that's why we all think about a Napoleon complex or short man complex. But yeah, Napoleon was the leader of France at that time, and that was the last great war. Napoleon became the leader due to the French Revolution, which overthrew the French monarchy finally. But see, there was so much back and forth even in that war. England just barely held its own. And the only reason the United States managed its independence is because England was so busy dealing with France and Napoleon.
So if it wasn't for them being distracted, U.S. might still be in American territory right now.
Might still be a British territory. You are exactly right.
So how did the power finally leave the British monarchy, and how did that dissolve, and was that ugly?
No, it was not. And to answer that question, the power... Okay, so I'm going to go back a little bit. Yes and no, it wasn't. There's been a couple of times where the Parliament has taken away the English monarch's authority. There was a civil war in England, Great Britain.
How did the Parliament get established?
It's called the Parliament of Lords originally, and it was all the lords of the land would convene, and they would vote on laws and so on and so forth.
So the king or queen would appoint someone to be a lord.
Right. And then they were part of the Parliament of Lords.
And they would do all the legislative work for them.
Right. So, if I remember correctly, the first time the English monarchs were ever challenged, their authority was lessened, was when it was King John. And this is the King John that, is cast as the villain in Robin Hood and all of that. Even though Robin Hood himself is fictional, King John is not. So King John was a very awful king. He has the worst reputation of all the kings of England. And
legitimately, he was really awful.
He really was awful, okay? He went and all the castles around England, he fortified and he made them stronger because he believed that he needed them to protect himself from his people. And he did. Okay? This is the king. He was so bad that the majority of his barons rose up against him and forced him to sign a treaty, basically.
That says you're not going to harass us at the workplace.
Well, kind of. It's a well-known treaty. The own United States Constitution is based off of this treaty. Most democracies are based kind of off this treaty. It's very well known. It's called Magna Carta.
That's crazy.
Okay? So, but when you look at Magna Carta, it's actually a peace treaty between the barons of England and King John. And at the very end, or close to the end, it says, if King John violates this treaty, the barons are legally obligated to go to war with the king.
So when they say go to war with the king, would he still have his representatives, or do they just mean take him under arrest and that would be it for him?
Well, it depends. He'd still
it depends
have
on
whatever armies or whatnot.
What the the voting pool thought of him at the time.
Right. So, anyways, there's been a lot of back and forth between, the Parliament of Lords and the nobility. The most recent ruler, as we know, is Queen Elizabeth. Okay, long may she continue to live. And she's been around for quite a while. But she, back when she was younger, started giving away the power of the monarchy. She's only a figurehead now.
So did she do this willingly?
Yeah, she did it willingly. She wanted to turn her
more democracy.
Make it more democratic, more of a republic than a monarchy. So the Queen of England, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, not only is she the Queen of England, she's the Queen of Scotland, the Queen of Wales.
Like, actually, it's not bullshit.
She is. She's the Duchess of Lancaster, which is a duchy, a very large, wealthy duchy in England. She's the Queen of Northern Ireland. She's the Queen of Canada.
She owns Canada?
Canada still recognizes her as their monarch.
What do you attribute this?
No, it gets even worse. She's also the Queen of Australia.
Oh my God! What do you attribute this human need to be submissive like this to one member?
But Canada and Australia are not submissive to her. They recognize her as the monarch, but they still had their own government.
So would they treat her as the queen, though, if she entered?
Yeah. She comes over, it's a state visit, and, she's treated as the Queen of England.
But is she also treated as the Queen of Australia, or is the title officially Queen of England, and then the other brackets that you said of how she...
It doesn't really matter, because she has no political authority in those countries anyways. They just recognize her as the monarch.
Does she have any political authority anywhere? Like, why would she give up... I mean, I'd at least want to control an island or something.
In Lancaster, she does, because, again, she's the Duchess of Lancaster. And, of course, in the United Kingdoms, she has political power, yes. She doesn't have any ability to say, no, we're not going to do that. But if she says, I don't think we should do that, a lot of people listen to her. A lot of people pay attention to her. So her words has weight. But she's not able to actually institute any laws or anything like that.
So based on what you're telling me...
But here, let me give you an example. So, haven't you ever found it strange? The United States, we have a president. Okay? Canada has a prime minister. The United Kingdom has a prime minister. Australia has a prime minister. New Zealand has a prime minister.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you about.
Okay, do you know what a prime minister, the definition of a prime minister, historically,
is he one of the lords?
The closest advisor to the monarch.
Like one of the lords.
Right, but the closest advisor to the monarch. The monarch is the ruler. The prime minister is the closest advisor to the monarch.
Oh, so you're always the vice president, technically.
Technically. But we recognize the prime ministers of all these countries as the heads of states of those countries. Because they are. Because the English monarchy has given their power away and said, you know what? This is what's best, we believe, for our people.
So how long do you reckon they can remain in this figurehead soap opera role?
Forever.
And the country will just keep giving them a stipend to maintain...
Well, you gotta understand.
It takes a long time to go through what they had.
No, she owns a lot of property.
Oh, she still owns it.
Okay, so Buckingham Palace is owned by the Queen. Okay? She's got, 7 different castles she owns. The land that they sit on. The entire Duchy of Lancaster's is hers.
So the money pipeline is still very open, and that doesn't...
Right. She gets like, I think it's like 81 million pounds a year.
Jesus.
That's before, tax or costs or whatever, but 81 million pounds every year is her annual income.
To just do it...
Whatever she wants with.
Okay, so based on what you're telling me, I want to see how well I can guess what happened in history versus actual facts.
Okay.
So the way you're telling me this story, I'm going to hypothesize that the way America came to be was by people that were originally lords that got together and said we could override this or something like that. But those were the people that broke away. Like, they had to have been in positions of prominence or directly challenging positions of prominence.
I wouldn't say that they were lords. Most of the lords that came to the American colonies actually tried to remain faithful to the British crown.
So how did that happen? Like, how did we finally break away then?
Okay, so the main reason that the British colonies, the American colonies, had such an issue is they didn't have any representatives in the Parliament of Lords. They had no voice. And the Parliament of Lords were passing laws and assigning taxes and all of
No
this.
taxation without representation.
Exactly. That was the rallying cry, and that's what the Tea Party in Boston was all about, because they were putting a tax on tea.
And they were making laws, but they didn't have a member of their Congress, as it were.
Right. We didn't have representation in the Hall of Lords because we had no lords. We had no landed nobles here in the United States.
So the U.S. was already an established British territory.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And we had gotten angry.
Well, see, okay, so we were an established territory, and there's a war you may have heard of called the War of 1812.
Mm-hmm.
That was a war between Great Britain and France. Another one. Okay? And a lot of it happened here in the Americas, in the North America. And it was the British colonies in what is now the United States and the French colonies up in Canada.
Oh.
And British colonists here served in the British military in the War of 1812 against excuse me, against the French troops in Canada. And Britain won that war. And, the colonial troops...
So Britain annexes Canada and...
Well, parts of it.
Okay.
As for winning, okay? Mm-hmm. Not all of it at that time. That happened later. But, that's why there's a large portion of, Canada that speaks French, over on the east. And then...
That's fascinating.
Is because eventually England took Canada away from France.
I love your ability to take bits and pieces I've learned throughout my life and just put it all in one timeline and make sense of everything.
So, the colonial troops that had fought in the War of 1812 went back to their colonies and back to their lives, and then England was like, things are getting kind of expensive for us. We need to get more money somehow. How are we going to do this? Oh, we got those colonies across the pond. Let's just raise their taxes. We'll make them give us more money.
And that was the straw that broke the camel's back. Or
that's what started it. And then, so eventually, of course, the Revolutionary War ended up happening.
Why didn't they just try to appease the people by giving them representation, ending it right there?
Why should they?
Because we'll have 4th of July.
But see, that's just what I'm getting back to. The only reason, okay, and the leaders in our Revolutionary War, if I can go back to that I'll come back to your question, were the same people that had served the British in the War of 1812.
Mm.
Okay, George Washington had originally been a British military officer. He served in the British military. That's why he knew, as much as he did about combat and strategy. So they pissed off the American colonies who had helped them win the War of 1812. But the only reason we still won our independence is because Napoleon was like, oh, no, we're going to go back at this again.
And they had their hands full.
So they had their hands full dealing with Napoleon in Europe, which, let's face it, is a lot closer than North America.
So in many ways, Napoleon is an American hero.
You could say that. It's because of the help that we received from the French, both directly and indirectly, that we are the United States today. If France hadn't been involved in the war with Great Britain, if Great Britain hadn't been involved in that war with France, they would have been able to devote a lot more resources.
And they would have won.
And they would have just stomped us. Okay? They would have just stomped us into the ground. They had much better training. They had much greater resources available to them, much better hardware.
So isn't that the way, though, historically, that most great nations go down by biting off more than they could chew and pissing off like more and more people before they completely end a conflict? Because it seems to me, had they made sure France was completely done before taking on more problems.
But see, the timing for Great Britain was terrible because we rose up at the same time they were dealing with this. This was the bigger threat overall to them than losing their colonies in the North Americans.
So America didn't hold much value at the time.
No, it held a great deal of value, but they couldn't devote the resources away from their war in Germany or in Europe. If they had sent more resources from their main war, from their main opponent, France, then France could have won.
So some of this had to be ego, because it seems like had they made certain concessions that would have been easy for them to make at the time, they could have avoided a lot of this and either remained in power or only lost a very limited amount of power.
That is correct. That's it exactly. The Parliament of Lords said, we don't care about the American colonies. We're going to just tax them. We're going to make them pay for this war that we're embroiled with France. What does it matter? They're not involved in the war. They need to help, and this is how they're going to help. They're going to pay for the war. And everyone here in North America is like, no. You're right, we're not involved in that war. Why should we pay for it?
It just seems to me that, better leadership, either better politicking to convince them that something was okay, if you wanted to pull this off, or being considerate. It just seems to me that the leadership wasn't acting in the best interest of their people and in the best interest of diplomacy and
at that time, I think you're absolutely correct. Okay, but again, when we did finally rise up and say, you know what, we're declaring our independence, because this didn't happen just like that. There was a build up to it. I mean, we sent people over there. Benjamin Franklin went over there several times to talk with them and try and get this ironed out peacefully. But at that time, they were too involved with what was going on in the war between them and France. That was their focus. And, when you get too focused on one thing, you start missing little details, and you start making little mistakes, and those little mistakes can pile up and pile up. We all know how that works.
I got two more questions I want to ask you the historical origins of.
Okay.
Why are Polish people considered stupid?
I have no idea. I have no idea. First of all, it may have something to do with charging tanks with horses. That might have something to do with it.
Did they really did that?
They did. In World War II, okay, before World War II actually blew up and became World War II, Germany had taken back parts that had been taken from them as a result of the First World War. Well, I believe it was 1939, Hitler made a non-aggression pact with Stalin. Okay? So, a bunch of fascists and a bunch of communists said, we're not going to attack each other. And the world was like, what? Because, they're supposedly blood enemies and everything like this. The concepts are completely polar opposites. Okay? Well, in between Soviet Russia and Germany was this little country called Poland.
Oh.
Okay? So
Poland's in between Russia and Germany.
Yes.
Okay.
So Hitler heads east and starts a war with Poland. He used some made-up cockamamie excuse to do it. But the point is he wanted territory.
Right.
So he invades Poland from the east, headed west. A couple days later, the Soviet Union invades Poland from the east.
So both of them want the exact same land.
Well, kind of. They had an agreement between them that, this part, that's yours. This part, that's mine.
And Poland, screw you.
That's right.
Okay.
During this war, and it wasn't much of a war, I think it took them a month to conquer all of Poland. But anyways, after the first 2 days, the Polish Air Force was obliterated. And the Germans had complete control of the sky with the Luftwaffe. Anyway, the Germans go rolling in with a bunch of tanks, which they call a bunch of panzer divisions. Okay? And just steamrolled. And they did two deep pincer movements. One on Warsaw and then on another city further to the east. I can't remember what it is. And just cutting the Poles apart. Okay, the Polish army at that time had maybe 500,000 men in the army. Okay, maybe only 200 tanks. And the Germans came in with like 1,000 tanks.
And it was game over immediately.
Okay, the Germans attacked with tank units. A unit of just tanks. The Polish tanks were spread out to support their infantry and cavalry. The support. Okay, so you'd have a bunch of infantry and a single tank.
Literally.
And then 100 tanks would come at them, and that single tank's going, I don't think we have a big enough gun.
Literally, the very first joke I remember in grade school coming to America was a schoolmate of mine looked at me and he goes, "Did you hear about the new Polish invention?" I said, "No, what is it?" He goes, "A screen door on a submarine." The very first joke I heard in America.
And I understand that. And again, I think it has to do with the fact that the Polish, because they had no other choice, attacked tanks with cavalry.
Okay, What? Now, I got from Howard Stern. So,
and it's not that I think they're stupid. I think
you're giving
great,
me
that's all they have.
You're giving me the origins. I'm not holding you to any of these
Okay.
comments at all, and no one else should either. This is
No, in my opinion, the Polish people were some of the bravest people in that.
Yeah, they're known as being brave fighters to this day.
Well,
Polish power.
Even though Poland was conquered in that month, like 50,000 Polish troops managed to escape, and they joined the French and the British militaries, and a lot of the World War II aces for Great Britain were Polish.
Well, so how did Poland get back?
When Nazi Germany finally betrayed the Soviet Union for about a year or two was being knocked around, and then they brought up all their people. Okay, the thing about the Soviet Union, the thing about Russia, it's a big area. They got a lot of people. Okay? So it ended up becoming like 1 million Germans versus 5 million Russians. Just from a numbers perspective,
there's no way.
It's like, okay. It's quantity over quality, and Russia started pushing them back. And of course, the U.S. finally got involved, and so Great Britain and the U.S. started coming in from the south, in Italy. And then we started coming in from the west, and the beaches of Normandy. So Germany's sitting here in the middle of, the Soviet Union on one side, being supplied by the United States, by the way, and Great Britain and the United States coming in from the west. And Germany's all by itself at this point. I mean, Mussolini, who had tried to expand his Italian empire and failed, was gone at that point. And so it's just Hitler himself. And at this point, Hitler is such a drug addict. He's so paranoid. And he believes that, it doesn't matter how many they are. If we have the will to win, we're going to win.
Meth was his drug of choice, right?
It was something like that.
Yeah.
It was speed, cocaine, and some other things that he would have on a daily basis. So he was just completely out of his mind at this point. And
so that's not exaggeration when you see the YouTube videos and Hitler's and they use this as a meme. I guess it's a scene from a movie or something where Hitler's like kirking out and breaking the pencil and it's not it.
No, it's true. So he would tell his generals, "You will not retreat unless I give you permission." And he would refuse to let them to retreat for days.
So they would
if not longer. He would create. He would say, "This is a fortified area. It will be defended to the death, no matter what."
So he would basically send his people to death.
Yeah,
and it would be futile.
He'd leave them there, okay, and they're getting just overrun. We have 100,000 men here in this one city. And 1 million Russians would walk up and say, "Okay," and artillery them for about an hour. Okay? And then come in with like 1,000 tanks.
And Hitler would want them to still be fighting.
Hitler would say, "No, you need to stay."
Oh, Jesus.
Wait a minute here. They outnumber us 10-1.
That explains the context of that clip where he's like, "You guys are cowards. Why don't you stay? You're supposed to be generals, blah, blah, blah."
Exactly. Okay, and if a general asked to retreat,
you
if
know
Hitler
it's over.
felt that that a general was asking to fall back too often, he'd fire the general. "You're not my general anymore. You, take over."
Okay. So the other thing I wanted to ask you about, and I got this from Howard Stern,
Okay.
listening to him. I noticed that he says a lot of bad things about the French. And it is funny because talking to you was the very first time I heard the French put in a positive light militaristically. Normally he calls them cowards and like very derogatory, emasculating terms. Why does he feel that way, and where's the origins from that, do you hypothesize?
It probably has to do with World War II.
Does that have anything to do with like his Jewish origin at all? Potentially, like
I don't think so, but okay. So after Poland was conquered in a month, Germany declared war on Poland, and France and Great Britain said, "Don't worry, Poland, we're with you." They both declared war. Okay, do you know what they did? Nothing. They sat on the French border and dug in.
So
That's what they did, okay? France, at this time in the world, has the largest, most powerful, best equipped military in the world.
And they didn't do anything.
And they didn't do anything except sit on the border and wait. And they waited for a year. A year. And they did nothing except sit there and wait. Okay? So, meanwhile, Germany's like, okay, well, Poland fell really quick. France and Great Britain have declared war, and they're just sitting there. What do we do now? I know. We're going to go take Normandy.
Where's Normandy?
Okay, so just north of Germany is a little bitty country called Denmark. Okay? Then there's the Bering Sea, and it's not the Bering Sea, there's the North Sea, and then there's the Scandinavian Peninsula. The westernmost country on the Scandinavian Peninsula is Normandy, or Norway.
Oh, Normandy is Norway.
No. I misspoke with Normandy. Normandy is the northwest corner of France.
Oh, okay.
Norway is the westernmost country on the Scandinavian Peninsula. What is it good for? Well, it's got a lot of iron. What can you use iron for? To make steel. Make weapons, armor, bullets.
So it's a mineral-rich country.
It's a very mineral-rich country. Very, very mineral-rich. Hitler goes in, and the French do nothing. The British try to do something.
But they got their hands full.
Extraordinarily. It's just an epic failure. It's so bad that the Prime Minister at the time, a guy named Neville, is forced to resign because of how big a debacle it is. Okay, the English troops that were sent there, they get a couple of port cities, and then like a week later, the British are gone. Just gone. And all of Norway is now controlled by Nazi Germany. Okay? Just the complete incompetence at this time. Anyway, so the Prime Minister of Great Britain is sacked, and this new Prime Minister is put into office. Churchill.
So
that's how Churchill became Prime Minister.
Wow.
Because he had said since, I believe it was 1935, you need to watch this guy named Hitler. He's up to no good. We gotta watch him.
So Churchill was on him all along.
Yeah, Churchill didn't want anything to do with Hitler, did not trust Hitler from day one. And everyone's just like, oh, shut up, pew pew. Because he was considered a radical. Anyways, on the very day that Churchill is made Prime Minister, Germany's like, okay, we're going to attack. And they used this new tactic. It was actually an old tactic, but with new technology called blitzkrieg. And they didn't win this initial battle because...
So Blitzkrieg, the thing that's now is saying that people yell was actually based on a proven military tactic that was known.
Yes, Blitzkrieg stands for Lightning War, and the Germans incorporated it at this time by using flying artillery. Okay, it's, Stuka dive bombers, which they turned into artillery that would dive down, blow up stuff, and disrupt command and control for the enemy. And then they would rush in with a bunch of tanks, secure objectives, and then keep going forward. And then infantry would come in and hold in places. So they go into the Netherlands and Belgium, which are two small countries that border Germany and France. They go in there, and the French and English troops that are sitting on the French-Germany border go up to deal with these attacks. Okay? They were diversionary attacks to get this huge, well-armed, well-trained army out of position. So they go up there to deal with it, and a German attack comes underneath them, south of them, and cuts off their supply chain, cuts off their communications, cuts off their ability for reinforcement. They weren't even aware that this had happened, and they're continuing to move north to counter these diversionary attacks. And then they turn around and say, what's going on? We're running out of bullets. Why can't we get through to headquarters? Why aren't we receiving new orders? Mm-hmm. Well, that's because the Germans were already behind them and had completely cut them off.
That's fascinating.
Okay, so France fell faster than anyone could ever have imagined. They had the most powerful military in the world at that point, and they fell over like nothing. The Germans at that point, while they were well equipped, kind of, their resupply was still horse-drawn carriages. Mm-hmm. Okay? The French military was fully mechanized. Trucks, planes.
I wonder
tanks.
what was going on in the propaganda at the time and how that was playing out to the media and to the citizens of the world.
Everyone was shocked. Everyone was shocked. In a matter of, I think it was a matter of a couple of weeks, France, who had the most powerful military in the world at that time, was gone, was conquered. Okay? The Germany set up a puppet regime to be France, okay? And the actual French military or government in exile went over to the United Kingdom, and everyone's like, what happened? We don't know.
That's why I'm really curious to know about how the political spin machine worked at the time, how the political leaders communicated wins, losses, humiliation, how they tried to spin it, how they were questioned.
Well, the French government that the Nazis put into effect officially apologized to Germany for having declared war, declared a non-aggression pact and mutual defense pact with Germany. Okay? And so Great Britain is now all by themselves. Us versus Germany. The Soviet Union at this point is just standing back going, no, this is fine with us. Germany's going that way. We have no problems with that. We have our non-aggression pacts with them. They're knocking over democracies. That's fine with us. France, the most powerful country in the world at that time, is now a puppet state. And Great Britain's like, well, the French have a really big fleet. That could be dangerous to us. So Churchill, as one of his first orders, aside from a miraculous rescue of the British Expeditionary Force, Dunkirk, he ordered his navy to go intimidate the French navy. And so his navy sailed into the Mediterranean, where there was a large portion of the French fleet, and said, hey, you guys need to come with us. You need to join us. If you don't, we're going to have to do something about you. And the French commanders on the ships said, no, we're not going to do that. So the British ships opened fire. Sunk them.
Jesus.
Also that couldn't be used by Germany to attack Great Britain, who at that point was the only country opposing Nazi Germany still.
Well, another thing I wanted to ask you about. So, Russia...
So that should answer your question why he's like, we surrender.
Yeah, okay, so that makes sense. The last thing I wanted to ask you, so I actually got this from John McCain, and I was very curious why he said that. He said that Russia is really just a gas station masquerading as a country. Is there, like, an affront to Russia where it's really weaker than its public persona and is really of no threat? Or
No. Russia is a great threat.
So what does he mean by gas station masquerading as a country?
So a large portion of Russia is Siberia.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And Siberia is in the Asian continent. It's very high elevation, very inhospitable.
Yeah, I mean,
it's cold.
It's where, like, all the shows like I Dream of Jeannie would vanquish someone.
It's very sparsely populated. But, on the flip side, very high in natural resources, including coal, oil, natural gas.
Mm.
Okay.
So while those areas are inhospitable, there's resources there that fuel the hospitable areas quite well.
Correct. So that might be what he's referring to. But to think that Russia is not much of a threat, Russia, even though the Soviet Union dissolved, Russia is still a very, very powerful country.
Mm.
Okay? If it came down to a war between us and Russia, we would probably win, but we would be hurting.
It would be really ugly.
Okay? Because they still have a lot of nuclear ordnance, too.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not something that we would want to get involved in.
Any hypothesis on North Korea? What your thoughts on their motivation or what's going on there? Why don't we just end them? Or is it because I heard the reason we don't is because they don't want to annex it and deal with their people.
No. The reason we don't end North Korea is a little piss hand. Okay? We could, if we wanted to, we could curb stomp North Korea with no real issues.
Mm-hmm.
The only reason we don't is because of their best friend, China.
Mm-hmm.
If we went in there and curb stomped North Korea, China would get involved. So it would actually become a war between us and China.
And China, they do a lot of the dirty for China in terms of janitorial work.
You could say that. I'm not going to say that, but you could say that. The argument can be made. But it comes down to this. Right now, China is probably, and it may very well be, the most powerful country in the world.
Yeah, because they don't care about human rights. They just push forward in one direction.
That's right. It's not that they don't care about human rights.
They're not distracted by democracy.
That's right. They don't have the democracy. They don't have the the bureaucracy that we have to deal with.
Right.
That when they say, this is where we're headed, everyone goes along.
They can go miles where it takes us steps.
And even though we are a very big and powerful nation, they have 1.7 billion people. And
they've got instant maneuverability, which makes them very dangerous.
You know, they're already there. We've got this big body of water we would have to cross.
Wait, any thoughts on the virus? They're saying it came from the Wuhan lab. Or Robert Redfield is... Any thoughts on Fauci you want to share?
No, I'm not going to get into conspiracy theories.
You're just so brilliant. I like picking your mind.
I mean...
There was a TV show I used to watch when I was a kid. You probably never heard of it. It was called Voyagers. It was these 2 time travelers. And they had this thing called...
They're rebooting it, by the way.
Really?
Yes.
You remind me of like a grown-up version of The Kid, and I feel like Bog, where we just landed. I'm like, okay, kid, what's going on here? And like, hey, okay, so back in the 18th, in a green light, okay, let's go.
Right, and I like talking about history. I like learning about history. You know, I'm sorry I don't have all the names and the dates crammed into my head. I have too much other stuff crammed in.
You're so good at making things that I've heard throughout my life in bits and pieces, but haven't had the opportunity. Nor were they told to me necessarily in an interesting way that would motivate me, but to learn more. But you were able to take like little fascinating pieces and put it in a timeline and then make me see how one thing connects to the other and the significance and the things that were missed out. Like when you were here last time, unfortunately we didn't record this conversation last time, but when you were talking to me about how the Muslim religion didn't necessarily just become curmudgeoned and anti-science. There were forces that led up to that.
Well, and like I told you last time, for the longest time, the Muslim religion was the science.
Right.
You know, they were the scholars. They were the ones perpetuating scientific discovery. They were preserving scientific knowledge from the ancient times of from Greece and Roman times. You know, they had all of that. They were going out and saying, hey, you got a book. Come here, let me see that. Okay, I'm going to copy this, all right? You know, that's the caliphs were saying. They were sending out expeditions just saying, go find knowledge. You know, knowledge is power. They believed that at the time. And yeah, because of the Crusades and the slowly chipping away at the boulder, it became more and more, more and more fanatical. No, we can't give in to these infidels. You know, we can't give in to these Christians. They're going to steal everything we have, and eventually it just became, no, you're wrong, we're right. And yeah, they lost their ways when it came to science.
What do you know about the Voyager remake?
Not much, unfortunately. I've only seen one advertisement, and it was at.
The premise is, for people that don't know, so this was a ridiculous show if you describe it on paper, because like when you think about it. So you go to time, okay, like forget the absurdities of the science and correction. Just look at the presentation. History is wrong. How can history be wrong? And then, like, they never explained that on the show.
Well, and they might with this new one. They've got a new cast.
But how the hell do you write that? Like, how do you fix that premise that history... You have to add something, like maybe a slider feature.
Well, in this case, I can't speak for certain, but maybe they're going to do, well, something's been changed and we're going to go back and we're going to fix it, or, you know... I hit the apple tree and that's why Newton got bopped on the head or something like that. I don't know. Mm-hmm. I saw a brief advertisement for it. Again, I don't have TV at my house, so it's just because I don't want to pay for cable.
Roku. Roku's free.
I got Netflix. I have Netflix. I have Hulu. So.
I'll give you this Roku if you.
No, I don't need a Roku. Jeez. I've got a computer. I've got a PS4. I've got It's not. I promise. Even though I live in a cabin in the woods, I'm not a hermit.
Well, the PS4 will do everything the Roku will do.
Exactly. Exactly, and that's what I primarily use it for, is for streaming services. So,
have you been watching Cobra Kai?
I haven't gotten into Cobra Kai yet. My
roommate
has devoured it. But
it's so good. It's so good. Okay, look, you haven't seen even season 1?
No, I haven't seen any of Cobra Kai.
You're going to go turn into a basket. You're not going to be able to do anything. You're going to sit there. It's 10 hours of your life you're going to instantly lose the moment you turn it on.
I don't have 10 hours to lose right now. What are you talking about?
You will instantly binge watch season 1 like crack cocaine. It is so great, so addictive. I've yet to see anyone give it less than a 10 out of 10 review.
Yeah, see the series I'm watching right now is on... I believe it's on Hulu, American Gods.
No, I haven't checked that out, but I will.
It's an interesting take. It's about what happens to, in a way, if I had to boil it down, what happens to gods that no longer have followers, worshippers?
Mm-hmm.
Do they go away? Are they still there? How did it's just an interesting take on, how gods were created, what sustains them, what happens to them.
Is it done from a historical perspective, or where you see their personalities in there?
You see it's a show, it's a story, and basically you had this normal guy apparently, and he's picked up by this god that doesn't really have any followers. He's chosen by this god to be his bodyguard. The god's bodyguard, and they go on this little adventure to rally the gods against the new gods of the current age, which is technology, the internet.
I'm going to check it out. And see, what's it called again?
American Gods.
American Gods. I'm going to check that out. But so Cobra Kai, the first season is masterful. Like, you really look at this writing and you're like, these people are legit geniuses. Like, just the fact that they were able to make it interesting and come out. And I'm a pretty creative guy, and that's coming from, like, when I call someone a creative genius, we're talking, they're actually, like, Einsteinian. So, the first season was incredible. The second season, major letdown. You can actually skip the second season. You can go from 1 to 3, and you'll be completely content. The second season, I'm like, oh, they're jumping the shark. So, like, it goes from a 10 to a 6.2. There's a couple of... there's, like, 2 characters that come in the second season that are pretty good. But nowhere near the first... The problem is the first season sets the bar really high. Really high. Uh-huh. And then the second season drops. But then the third season sets it as good as the first season, but it's not so good that you don't have self-control. Like, right now, I'm on episode 7, and I can watch an episode a day or so and be okay. The first season, though, you can't do that. Like, you'll miss work.
I can't miss work.
You're gonna have to carry a cell phone with you to watch it. You got that.
My cell phone on me. Are you kidding? I can't go anywhere.
The first season you'll have to finish. It's really, like, I mean, if you want to do something fun for yourself, just you today, watch at least the first episode. You will be fascinated by how good it is.
So if you want, I'm gonna give you a series to watch. You have Netflix.
Yeah, I got everything.
If you're interested in...
I actually got a dirty site I'll send you the link to.
No.
And a link to everything.
But right now on Netflix, there's a series out called The Secrets of Great British Castles.
Oh, that sounds good.
Okay. And it takes a certain castle, I believe it's 2 seasons, 8 castles each season. Mm-hmm. And it talks about the history of that castle, who built it, why it was built, famous battles that it's been involved on, so on and so forth. So it's very historical. It'll give you a better idea of how England was conquered by the Normans, and it'll give you insights into the history of the British Isles.
Next time we meet, can you tell me about the history of Oregon and about the underground tunnels and the Oregon Trail and how all this came to be? Because
Are you talking about the underground tunnels up there in Portland?
it's something I heard it was called being shanghaied.
It is. They're called the Shanghai Tunnels.
Mm-hmm.
And just to go into it briefly, but you used to, you'd go drinking.
And they'd open the trap door.
And you'd get drunk, or they'd knock you over the head and take you through these tunnels. When you'd wake up, you'd be on a ship.
Oh my God.
And you'd have to serve on the ship until you came back.
It's like a horrible candid camera prank.
Oh, it was forced labor.
That's crazy.
So that's the brief history of that. We can go into it more in depth later.
Yeah. So yeah, I would really here. Let me stop this recording. This was awesome.